Great. Good morning, everyone. Today is January 15th, Friday. As you all know, we met 2 days ago for options 3 and 4 concerning New Lebanon School. We also talked a little bit about the field and its implication relative to the school. And we decided to then meet today to see if we can reach a consensus regarding the designs. Thinking about just where we are, we had talked a little bit about everything sort of being on the table. I recall the conversation, in particular, Bill, with you in terms of how many options, and if there was only one option, that's not really a choice. It's not a binary decision making process. So I just want to be clear that although 3 and 4 were presented to us on Wednesday, quite frankly, any of the options technically are open for discussion. I don't want to limit it if you have an opinion or a say or what have you regarding any of the letter options or any of the number options. But the goal today, to the extent that we can come to an agreement and a consensus, is that we will then put forward one of the options, clearly 3 and 4 being at the forefront of that. And so with that, you should have all received from administration their thoughts and comments memorialized, which were consistent with what was stated at the meeting last Wednesday concerning their opinions about 3 and 4. You should have also received an email from Peter Bernstein. He is unable to be here as he is traveling, and unfortunately, just with the timing of this meeting, he's unable to even join us via telephone. And there have been a few community responses that you should have received. I think 3, if I'm not mistaken. All constructive, however, all very similar, and that's not surprising to what we had already discussed relative to the site and the highway and the ravine or the swale or whatever we're calling it. And so today is I guess your day to give your opinions, talk about the various options, and in the hopes that we can move this forward. Board of Ed meeting is the 21st for a presentation and hopeful support of our decision, assuming we reach one today. And then we'll see if the Board of Selectmen are willing to hold a meeting for this as well, so that we can move it through the MI process. So with that, I open it up just for a general discussion. I'm not sure I even want to put a particular option sort of out there as a motion. Just a discussion as to what you've seen from when we first started to today about the various options and where you think we should be headed.
Richard, I have a quick question.
Sure.
The option 3 footprint that I'm seeing here on the site plan shows a little bit more wiggle room to the north in reference to the pink boxes. Going deeper into the plans, it looks like there was a specific border line that you used for the northern facade. And I think it's actually on this plan.
Yes.
The question was, is this the pink box, or is that, I was confused as to what this was, and the question was, is there any additional wiggle room inside the pink box, as I'm seeing it here, to possibly move that facade a little bit more north, or are we kind of constrained by whatever that is, and I didn't know what that was?
That is the property line.
Okay.
In other words, that's the edge of the right-of-way. The right-of-way
Okay,
is
so
there.
that's the jogs. Okay.
Exactly. So we didn't want to cross that.
Okay. But it's just into the 50-foot, and the 50-foot starts from here. Okay.
Yeah. So what Nick is referring to is the northern facade of the building, where that is relative to the property line. It's right at the property line, within inches of the property line.
Okay. I think there's aspects of both ideas here that I like. There's aspects of both that I dislike. I'd like to commend you because it seems that you took everything that we've talked about and still came up with commendable designs. I think looking at, as an example, an aspect that I like of option 4 was the spine, the glass, the library, that kind of thing. And really taking a look at the analysis of the site and positioning, and going back and forth, and I was kind of tossed, and it was actually looking at both, saying I could go with both. I think one of the things that actually kind of opened my eyes a little bit more was the information provided by the staff. Thank you, Barbara, for this information. And then going back after reading that and looking at this again, and looking at the option 3 and the layout and how it's more centralized, and like very circular off of the center area of the cafeteria, the library, all of that. And not that there's more pros and cons, but understanding something that Barbara O'Neill had said a while back, it's all about the children. And this design is all about the children, and how the children are educated, and how the staff needs to work to build it. And I think, in my opinion, option 3 is the way to go. And the only question I would have is, I understand that it seems that everything's here. And it seems that we're getting 2/3 of option 1, but it still works. And if there's any way we can actually get into the right of way and just give a little bit more room, I think we've been beneficiary. So, thank you very much for the design. Fantastic. Really option 3.
Anyone else with questions or comments?
Just to have something to point at, does anybody have a big format plot or any of the drawings? And I guess I have the little one too. For me, both designs achieve most of the objectives, but do both designs, are we obliged in both designs to open up Richard Street, which the community has wanted closed for 20 years for that pipe rail gate fencing? Are we obliged to make asphalted vehicles where we could have green grass and humans?
That really depends upon the fire marshal's decision on this. I believe it's possible to have an emergency access up above, coming down from Richard Street, not having to cross the playground, the playfield.
Okay.
But ultimately, the decision is his, and even if he were to say, I really need access directly on the north side of the building, you could achieve that in a minimal way. So it would be just available for emergency vehicles. We could, for instance, gate off near the intersection where the library driveway is, and so that wouldn't be a through street, and would only be available for emergency vehicles.
Right, so here on the east side, you're saying you could close it, but over here on the west side, on the library side, you say you could close it, but over here on the east side, the Richard Street side, are you still opening what today has the pipe rail gate fence?
If it's for service, I think it would be a good idea to open up that gate. If there were no gate down here, you know, unless there's a driveway here in front of the building, then maybe it makes sense to keep that. You need access from one side or the other.
Right, sure.
So we need a gate in one location.
No, and for my part, and I shared this with the committee, I guess I didn't share it with you, which was my oversight, I apologize. But in 1995, when the kindergarten, when the building was expanded to the north, the community said, we don't want traffic there. In 2006, when they started the Schubert renovation, they said, we don't want through traffic there. And when they finished the Schubert renovation in 2009, for the third time, the community through P&Z said, we don't want vehicular access from the east of Richard side. That's why we want to maintain the ladies pipe rail gate fence. So, for my part, I think we should respect what the community has said for 20 years and the facts on the ground, which is, we don't desire vehicular access, even if it's once a week for the dumpster and twice a week for the food service deliveries and such. I think the community has clearly said, that, and I think it's best designed, that it's better to have grass and puppies than asphalt vehicles on that side. I just think it makes it better, it makes a better environment. It's next to a park here, and so I think what the community would like to see is that. So you're not accessing it from the Richard Street side, which we don't today and haven't for 20 years. Let's not open it up and bring traffic where there hasn't been any for 20 years, and the community has prevented it and not wanted it for 20 years. And the other thing, if we're gonna talk about this north-south placement of whether it's building number 3 or the east wing of building number 4, since we should abandon, and my recommendation is we should abandon the street which is unused and get this right once and for all. We can abandon the street. That too is in my memo, how it's done. We asked P and Z, I asked Katie to do what's necessary, it's three quick steps, it's easily done. And since the town owns the land on both sides of this right-of-way, we can ignore the right-of-way. Look, it's irrelevant. It's just square footage that we can use to make green grass and park, field, gym to field transition. So, so I wouldn't. There's no need to be respectful or to. That property line is irrelevant. It's like we don't live on both sides. It just doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. So, we're going to have this discussion when you get a chance to meet with Mr. Siciliano's people, but I think since we have a once-in-a-generation chance to get this field useful for the community, we should, and it's presently undersized and does not provide adequate recreational opportunities for this community and for the kids, that we should expand it, make it larger, where it's not a full-size field, if that's not doable. It's not doable, but something larger than the present inadequate and small one means the structure in the ravine wants to shift south a little bit. So I think that is a community outcome that's important to people. In a weird way, what the ed spec says about phys ed, it's got a page on the gym. And on the page on the gym, it says, we'll have things like, we'll have recessed sleeves for the volleyball net, uprights, and okay, that's a spec. I guess that's gonna contribute, the recessed sleeves are gonna contribute to, to educational outcome, but it says nothing about the field. And that's many, many, many times more important for phys ed of these kids than the recessed sleeves, which are in the spec. So it's just an oversight that the field is not in the ed spec. Phys ed, remember I asked you how many hours a week the kids spend in phys ed. Basically 7% of their days in phys ed. It's part of the curriculum. It's important. So, although we have sleeves in the gym for the volleyball uprights and the ed spec, let's treat this. This is your opportunity to have an influence on behalf of the phys ed experience of these children. Let's make sure we keep our eye on the larger or more important things, which is this field. It's more important than the sleeves. Sorry, it's a dumb example, but let's make that field larger, and so if that compels us to take that road, which no one uses, or just take it off the map and abandon it, and move the building so we get an optimal phys ed outcome for the children, that's, I think, what we would be doing a service to the community and the students if we did that.
Bill, have you talked to Leslie Tarkington about the notion of the one campus and the other property?
And the only reason I say that is I know she has some very strong viewpoints on not opening up our site to the ball field. And for a whole host of reasons. And all I'm suggesting, and I'm not,
Yeah, sure.
generally I agree with your points. My only concern or my only comment right today is if you could please reach out to Leslie and, because I can't quite understand what the objection would be. And so if you could do that in between, as we move this process along.
Real quickly, what she's told me is, if you have remediation required on a site, on a parcel, don't merge a couple parcels, because then the environmentalists will say you have to remediate standards on the one where the pollution is, plus the one that you merged with it, because now it becomes one property line. I don't think that's relevant. We gotta remediate what we gotta remediate. This whole thing has many parcels, and they're all owned by the town of Connecticut, the town of Greenwich. So
We should just understand
let's
that,
not-
because it's,
Yeah,
I don't
I
wanna
don't-
get bogged down into that.
Yeah, I don't think Leslie really has looked at the plot
Okay,
maps
well-
like I have. So I think it's a question of merging and remediation. I don't think it's relevant.
I have
Richard, just one other question, then one. So, I have heard do you wanna call it a criticism or comment, that the ed specs that we have do not include field, other than, I guess there's a line item for we're putting a field back to its sort of native condition, or the condition it is now. I think there's 200,000 in for,
That budget line item that I included, that has to do with a contractor staging area. Anticipating that the contractor would have to have some staging, threw in a number for restoration of the site once the contractor and his trade.
so if they staged on the field, the 200 would be to return the field to
Precisely.
effectively what it is today, not making any improvements to it
Correct.
whatsoever.
Correct.
Fair enough. In a scenario though, where we decided to develop the field, improve it in any way you use that term, generally speaking, is that reimbursable? Is that part of school projects?
Yes, if you make the project limit capture the playfields, yes. It is
So,
reimbursed.
from a taxpayer perspective, if we were to improve the field as part of this project, and those improvements cost X, in theory, and I'm not asking you to guarantee it, but in theory, there's an 80% reimbursement rate.
That's correct.
All right, so that's, I mean, clearly that's something that at least needs to be considered as we move this along.
Definitely.
Fair.
And
Okay.
if-
Hold on, I want to give other people an opportunity,
Yeah,
because
good
if not,
idea.
I just wanted to have a comment about the field. It's my understanding whenever the town expands the use of a field, it does a traffic study pattern. And that traffic study, I would assume, would have to be done before we consider expanding the use. And making it a full-size soccer field is definitely expanding the use. And I can tell you from living in Byron for 30 years, we are at a beyond a maximum of cars that are coming in and out. I can walk faster into Portchester and back and get most things than you can drive. So I think that that would draw people from other sides of town, which is great in a way, but I think the town would need to do a traffic study pattern for that increased use.
okay.
So I don't know how relevant it is to include it now.
Other comments on buildings 3, 4, other options? Questions for Richard? Go ahead.
I have one question, Richard. It's not, wouldn't be a driving force of the project, not to let the tail wag the dog, but the school is used for voting, and it's used for, night activities for concerts and things. It seems difficult for people to drive up, and now that we have expanded parking, won't be all over Byram, but then you go up and you have to go down.
Yes.
So is there any way that you could create, because there's a lot of people that walk to vote, to go to concerts. Is there any way perhaps you could consider a type of secondary entrance for those, at that time, for those purposes?
At the lower level?
Yeah.
Um,
Just because the topography, creates the condition where you have to go up, walk up walk in and then walk down.
Right.
But-
um, I don't know if it's possible to use the library parking for such events.
People do.
Then you could walk to the lower level directly there and enter for voting if you're going to have that activity either in the gymnasium or the cafeteria, both.
And there's a lot of people that live close enough to walk as well.
Yeah, that's entirely possible.
Would the handicap parking be close enough to the building in that scenario?
No, handicap really should be as close as you can get. So the ones that would count are the ones that near the main entrance to the school. Unfortunately, that's the way it is. So people who are disabled would park there, they would go in and they would take the elevator down to the lower level.
Other questions, comments? Brian?
I thought you did a great job with both designs. You know, I could see going either way on these, and I applaud you for that. You know, the parties of the buildings are distinctly different. One seems to lend itself much more to the type of ID educational experience that we're looking for in the particular building, and then the chief administrators, educational administrators for the town, as well as the school themselves, have declared their specific preference for number 3. So, in my mind, both would create a great educational environment. However, I would defer to the opinions of the educators in town, because they are, in essence, our clients on this. And so that's why I would support option 3 going forward, for that reason. I think there are some internal layout issues that'll get hammered out over the next few weeks and months. I think they're all very achievable, so I look forward to, should we go forward with option 3, seeing how those progress going forward.
I'm not gonna read verbatim, you all have received the email from Peter Bernstein, but he did ask for us to share his comments. He said that if he was here, he would vote for option 3. And that in terms of option 4, he is not in favor of a split building concept. And then he talks about the efficiencies and some of the things we talked about yesterday. So I just wanna make sure that he's clear of where he would be on this. Yeah,
Can I go back for a second to the handicap access issue, especially during voting season or other kinds of events? If we do create a gate near where you would enter the play field, near where the library is, and created using grass pavers or other techniques to allow emergency vehicles only, deliveries only, and handicap parking only near that area, that could achieve what you're trying to do. So there's a bit of a conflict of making it entirely grass versus making it useful for vehicles, but I think we could do something like that, prepare the base and put in grass in order to achieve that.
Richard, how, and again, I think the comment about tail wagging the dog is an important one, although you also look to make sure that you really think this through before you start really going with your design through the MI process and the like. This, whether it's 3 or 4, or quite frankly, a lot of the other designs, if we were to open up the field as part of our site, which we've been reluctant to do for the reasons, I think, for the remediation reasons, I'm not sure for any other good reason, but if you were to open up the site to include the field, and I don't want to get anyone nervous, we're not building on the field, but simply for the purposes that were discussed about improving the field and maybe eliminating the road and the like, would that at all play in how you looked at the north side of the building? Because it appears that you specifically, for instance, you create a storage area that specifically is not a rectangle, simply to stay within the property line.
You're correct.
Right, so would that give you slightly more flexibility if we were to say that north property line is of no consequence?
Yes.
would it do more than just kill the diagonal walls? I'm looking at option 3. I think in line with what you.
Well, I don't wanna get necessarily bogged down into exactly,
Right.
but for purposes of what Patricia brought up about community access, and things of that nature, certainly I'm not looking for the answer necessarily right now, just seeing how tight it is on that property line. If we were to make a definitive recommendation to get rid of the road, and to use that space, assuming the fire marshal doesn't mandate something even more onerous than that's there now from a pavement standpoint. It seems to me that then you have a little bit more wiggle room on the building side as well, and so you almost get a sort of a benefit on both sides. More green and a little more room for whether it's mechanicals where we know we're already deficient in terms of space and potentially access.
The answer is yes. Wiggle room is good. So if we did not have to stay behind that property line, yes, I would advocate rethinking that whole area and improving it. So if the storage room needs to be changed, if we create another entrance, let's say a vestibule that is convenient for people to enter into the gymnasium without going into other parts of the building for such activities, then yeah, I would say definitely let's do that.
The downside risk that I've heard, just again, and not being an expert myself on this, is there's a separate process to abandon a road, and the concern is whether or not that delays the project. But those are all things, my understanding is from a MI approval standpoint, we would be able to move forward with this while continue to thinking about
Yes.
all of these other issues.
Yes, I would advocate moving forward with the MI process that will trigger the P&Z process. We'll
Review
have
by the
another-
fire marshal.
Exactly, traffic will become an issue, public input will become an issue, and we can certainly discuss at that point abandonment of the road, which I believe is an RTM process.
Sorry, yeah, definitely, when I sent my memo on this topic to the committee and hit reply all, it doesn't land with you, my error. But I sent this memo to the committee that, I'll just read a couple sentences. Abandonment of, and I reviewed all this with Katie DeLuca so that we're prepared and had the right answer. Abandonment of the street can be accomplished with the consent of the RTM as part of the school construction, that's routine here. The consent of the Commissioner of Public Works that we don't use the street, that's true here. And MI improvement, and this is part of the larger MI, so it's not an additional thing, it's gonna be a chapter in the MI. So all of those are steps that you're passing through anyway. None of those are
Can we
preventative.
clarify that? Because I think it might be a separate MR.
Well, that Katie told me it wasn't.
Commissioner Road?
To abandon the road, isn't
You know,
it?
Katie said she preferred the all people original.
I heard at the last
It's a
Board of
separate MI, it's
Selectmen that
gonna
it's a
require a
separate
Board of
MR.
Selectmen.
I don't know, Katie told me last week that she'd like to see it all as part of one. So let me say that other thing, about the fire marshal and what the requirements are. So this question came up. Our fire marshal is Sean McDonald, a bunch of us know him, you know him. So I asked him, Sean, do we need a road in from Richard Street side for fire access to this? He said, let me research and get back to you. He researched and got back to me. And he said, after research, he said the only obligatory necessity of my office at the fire marshal is just to have access to the fire department connection. So that's it. Which is, I said, what's that?
Hydrant.
No, it's the part of the building where you pressurize the,
Signage.
yeah, the Siamese, it's the Siamese. So he said, if I can get to the Siamese, I don't need a street coming in from Richard Street where that pipe rail gate fence is. So I thought those would be useful answers to the questions we're kicking around here. I'm sorry I didn't share them with you, but I will.
That's a good point. I mean, and that's why I keep saying the fire marshal. He has the authority to interpret the fire code requirements, and it's really his judgment. And I've seen these judgments go a number of ways in different communities. So if he's agreeable to doing that, I think that's good.
Okay, any more comments, questions on the design, the lighting? Yes, Claire?
Just dovetailing on that, when you made the comment about the Commissioner of Public Works, under the charter, we are given all the powers of the Commissioner of Public Works. So in that scenario, we play that role. That's just my comment on that. I had a question about, I guess we can work through on the variance report. There's ability to adjust some of these. Right?
Definitely, there has to be.
Because I see some, I mean, some vary more than others, and some of the numbers on them, you know, hit me as more pressing than others, so.
Like the library.
Like the library and the computer lab. And then my other question was, in terms of the two designs, could you speak to whether both lend themselves to forms of off-site construction?
Sure. We've done off-site construction on a number of projects, and I believe both of them lend themselves to it. What it would require is for us to sit down with some prefabricators and sort of carve up the building in a logical way that the prefabricators could then sectionalize it, and then you have to analyze what the routes are to make delivery. You have to comply with DOT requirements. So it is possible, no matter what building it is, in the early stages of the design, you sit down with prefabricators and you determine where the joints should be.
And then the follow-up question is, this may not be a fair question to ask you right now, but in terms of, if you had to think about it right now, do you think that off-site construction would help in the time of getting the project done quicker in one version versus the other? Not just any time saved, but a material amount of time being saved by using off-site construction. Because I understand from our prior work that the cost of the materials isn't any different. It's time value. So I'm just wondering if that would be significant in either of these two designs.
I would rather have the CM answer that question because he has to sequence all of the work. And if he doesn't sequence it properly, then it doesn't really matter. You'll end up spending the same amount of time or longer. You really have to have your ducks in a row. He has to get prefabricators on board early in order to have commitments from the prefabricators to deliver by certain dates. Otherwise, it's just like any other tradesperson, you're at the mercy of sequencing things on the site. So he has to have that commitment from the fabricators. He has to guarantee to the fabricators that he will build a foundation within a certain tolerance. All of that is doable, it's just that CM needs to be on board to figure all that stuff out. Yes, you could save time, yes.
Material amount of time?
Sure, a material amount of time. And you're less at the mercy of weather. So, if any of the work needs to go through cold months, winter months, it's easier to do it in the factory than it is in the field.
Oh, I will just share from a Hamilton Avenue Building Committee perspective. They had to fabricate the steel for the facade, and supposedly that was the major delay. So it was custom, and for one reason or another, it wasn't coming out of that, and we couldn't move on with the project because we weren't getting the steel from the fabricator. So there's a balance.
Well, I don't know what happened in that situation, but the fabricators need to be released for fabrication early enough for them to have the benefit on the site. So if that steel fabricator wasn't released early enough for whatever reason, it's a stumbling block.
Sure.
I have to excuse myself in a couple of minutes because I have a magnet open house going on at the school. So I did send you folks just a sort of a proposal of what some of the thinking was about how we as an administration feel about the two designs. But I'm hearing that some of you didn't get it because you couldn't open the attachment, so I've sent it to you all as a Word. In some, we pretty much are supportive of 3 because
Thank you for that, Barbara. It's very helpful.
Oh, you're welcome. Just summary that we're very supportive of 3 because of its really facilitating the IB programming and the flow in the building and the way children can break out and work and collaborate and the view lines and the sight lines. So we're very important with that. I just wanted to say that, like Bill, I'm confused as to why the ed specs are not very clear about the field because we talked so much about it, and it certainly was in all of the plans that Chisholm had done. The field was a big highlight. We do say that one of our big concerns was accessible outdoor play spaces, including a variety and scale of activities. We spoke a lot about field, but we didn't detail it. Field is very important. I know, first of all, what we really need is a building. What we want is a building, and safety is my priority for all of the children that we deal with. But if there's any way we can certainly fold in the issues about the field. These are, I put it in the bottom of my statements here that these are fabulous soccer players. They don't have access to that kind of activity in the town because it's so far away, the students in the building. So I'd love for them to have that opportunity. I'd love that the town have another resource right there at the building on that side of town. I think it'd be excellent. In their PE program, they're really wild with being outside. Now, because it's such a public field, so no matter what, this will be better. Being so public, many of the materials disappear when they change classes and bring students back in because it's a public field, so people pick up the balls and walk away. So we haven't used that opportunity for our students. So I think that in addition to the other comments I made about the sites, I hope we can fold the field back into the discussion in some way, shape, or form. I do have to leave, so are there any other questions about
Yes, I
this?
have a question for you. I know that the educational programs change over decades.
Right.
You know, we're always in a flux with educational programs.
Right.
If it were to change from an IB program to say more traditional, do you feel that Scheme 3 will still work well?
Yes, yes. First of all, it just has a nice flow in the building. It's more compact. Although passing time is still far from the pre-K to the gym, it's not as far as it would be in Scheme 4. So there is more of a efficiency of moving students throughout the building. I think the light is always going to be important no matter what kind of environment we're teaching and learning in. I think there are many traditional spaces. There are still classrooms. It's not a broken down kind of environment where the walls are moving, whatever, so that it can accommodate lots of different learning styles. But what's key to it is that there is that central hub where people are passing through and sort of all partaking in the learning that's going on, that central learning commons that's in the middle of the building. I don't think that's going to go away for a long time, where we have people, as you know, in the workplace, we collaborate all the time now. You have to work as teams, you have to be able to see each other's work and be a part of it. So I don't think, I imagine what happens in the future will be some more personalized components of collaborative learning. I know it sounds oxymoron, but people will do personalized work and then come together as collaborative teams. So I think the building has both those spaces.
Okay, great.
That's important. Just quickly, in terms of, we had a Board of Selectmen meeting yesterday, and just comments that, from a process point of view, Steve, it was the, if, say, it's 3, right, and we introduce this, the field concept to define it, whether regulation, not regulation. But I believe you said yesterday that that would require, to get it to a point, also, I'm using Bill's example, a regulation soccer field. It's gonna require outside that perimeter, correct?
Correct.
Of the MI.
Correct.
So you're going to be voting on an MI, reintroducing a field that will go outside the MI after. That's problematic in terms of the process point of view. I just wanted to bring that up again. So, how we get around that I don't know, but I think that's the discussion. If we're serious about a field, I mean, a regulation field, I'm not saying you do or don't. There is a process to consider, but whether or not the field is driving the school, that's the discussion for you all to have. But just remember, again, what you said, it's true, that will be outside the perimeter of the MI you're gonna be voting on.
And that's a good and useful point, and all this is, it's a little complex, which is why we brought in the experts and proposed to have a meeting another day. It's not all or nothing. I think it's a question of small, medium, and large. There's small fields and mediums and larges, and maybe we can't have a large, but we should have a medium. I think today what you have is less than small. So we should, so anyway, it's not all or nothing, and it's not gonna take the building and move it way over there. We're talking about tweaking it to make an outcome that suits the phys ed and suits the community. But yeah, you're right about process, I'm sure.
We also,
Hold on. So, we haven't, does anybody else want to just speak first on a particular option, so we can move the ball forward, or have other questions for Richard in terms of the design of buildings? Because what I don't want to have happen is us have this conversation deteriorate to the point where we're talking more about a field and a road and less about the building and design. Because the fact of the matter is, that's our job, and that should be driving our conversation. All of these other points are important, and they go towards that, but as we discussed on Wednesday, and Richard, correct me if I'm wrong, all of these designs, where the field is and where the road is has some implication, but little relative to designs. All the designs effectively come up to the property line, and all of the designs fit within the shaded area. And so, these are important discussion points, but relative to design, they're less important.
Correct.
So I want to stay on point from that perspective. Anybody else from the committee on the design of the building? Yep.
Yeah, but all I'm saying is though, if we're gonna have a real discussion about the field, or not, I know it's not driving back and forth, if you're voting on an area, and then introducing the discussion after the vote has taken place, it's sort of a moot point. What are we doing, gonna reintroduce another MI? I mean, they're just putting that out there. I mean, either gonna have a discussion about field or not, it's not driving the school, but if what I'm hearing is correct, from what Bill is saying, this is important or not, how do you do with that? I mean, I don't, we're not gonna, the Board of Selectmen is not gonna be boxed into afterwards. We vote on the MI, the school's there, then all of a sudden, now the field, you're gonna have to change we're gonna be back again. So, Board of Selectmen's not gonna be boxed into the field driving the school, it should be the other way. That should be incorporated in the conversation now, is my point.
In order to make in order to make the field larger, we have to make the woods small. And I, for one, think that there should be room for both. And fields and gyms always seem to override. It happened, our projects for the schools. It happened when I was on the high school building committee. All the money seemed to go for the gym and the pool and the locker room. And as much, whatever I said for the arts, spaces, was always shoved aside to let's do it later. And we know what happened later with the auditorium now. The prices are significantly higher, it was such a big project. But in this case, it's science and art throughout these woods. It would just be a fabulous opportunity to put nature paths, for people to come out and do sketches, for the community to do that. Besides the beer drinkers, it would be great to have this really developed into a nice part of the school. And the more you take from the fields, again, the more you're pushing art and science to the side. And I think that would be a great asset to the school for those of us that are not particularly soccer players.
Laura?
I just want to say I'd like to optimize the field. I think part of the issue why the field is not used is access, in addition to some of the concerns about public use of the field. But if we're talking about moving the structure south in order to accommodate a field, then I go back to, well, why do we have option 3 instead of option 1? So, I mean, again, we have to be mindful about the direction that the Board of Selectmen has given us. I think the architects have worked very hard. If we're going to have a discussion about the road and maybe having more access north, let's talk about it. But I think the question has been asked and answered on the southern boundary of the property. So I think we need to be mindful of that.
Brian, or Jake, did you
Well,
want
I
to?
think it's been clear that the first selectman said that we have to stay within these boundaries. So even if we introduce the fields, I don't know how we can move the building outside of those boundaries. So,
I don't either, that's what I'm trying to.
but I think that's how we go into it, is say that if we do introduce a new field to this design, our building cannot move outside of the boundaries that are given. So I don't know anything that would change significantly from the MI standpoint.
Right, we're not saying that.
Now we move the building somewhere else.
Brian?
Well, I guess my feeling is we've talked about this enough. I'd like to move that we vote on approving option 3 as the preferred option to be sent for further consideration of it and MI.
Okay, moved by Brian. For a second? Second by Dean. Further discussion My 2 cents on the road and the field is as follows, to sort of address all the points. My suggestion is we move forward with this MI. I believe, just to dot the I and cross the T, that the ed specs probably have to include the field. Our purview always has been within the confines of the ed specs. And so that needs to be adjusted. On top of that, whether or not it's 1 MI or 2, I think at some point you get bogged down into semantics. I think we go forward with this referral of MI, and to the extent that we can influence whether this committee agrees or not to then abandon the road and then develop the field as part of the project, we should do so. Whether that's an additional MI that follows through, at least doesn't stop the progress of the design of a building, getting the construction manager on board. What we do doesn't implicate the building itself. And at some time, the field will catch up to the building and we'll be able to then move it forward. And I think people will then have an opportunity to opine separately on the building versus the field and the road and everything, and we keep them separate. Because the goal would be, clearly, the main focus is the building. And so that's how I think we should proceed.
I have a question for Drew. Does a new MI have to go forward if the field remains in its current boundaries and is just improved?
No. Well, it depends on what you mean by improved.
So if, right now the field's not level, so if we talked about some leveling, making the field more playable, but staying within its current boundaries.
My understanding is yes, actually, Steve.
Well, here's the other problem with asking these questions, and I really would like to also stay away from commenting on what other officials say. Things get lost in translation. It's a game of telephone at some point where if we'll bring in the people from P&Z, who I guess have to make that decision, or the town attorney. And so we'll see. And we need funding. So the other part of this is, invariably, there's nothing, just so it's crystal clear, all of these numbers include 0 for doing any improvement other than returning it to what it is now in our budget, right? But to the point I made earlier, if it's 80% reimbursement, why would you not do it at the time that you're doing the school if in fact you have that reimbursement opportunity? Other questions or comments?
I think that's all good. Let me ask Drew, all those conversations, long conversations with Board of Selectmen between the school and the Hill, school and the Ravine, et cetera, would you anticipate that the Board of Selectmen would approve 3 if 3 were the decision of this committee?
All those in favor of option 3 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Is it 800? Do I have that right?
Peter's not.
Peter's not here.
Peter's not here, 700.
Brian, could you repeat it so I could write it in the minutes, probably?
Okay,
Move that we vote that option C be voted to approve.
3.
option 3.
Three.
Option
What'd I say?
C be chosen, go back to that.
Three, C.
3 be chosen as the preferred option to send for MI approval.
I'm sorry. We move that vote that option 3.
Be the chosen option to forward for MI approval.
Close enough.
Okay, I wrote that before about the MI, but isn't it that we're referring it to the BOE?
We are referring it to the
BOE.
BOE.
Okay, I amend it to BOE for MI. What Jason?
So we will be,
Am I writing BOE or am I?
Board of Ed. It's the Board of Ed.
Okay, that's what.
Board of Ed will then pass it along to the Board of Selectmen if they support.
Good.
We expect to take this up next Thursday. Are you available to come to our meeting?
Look. So real quick, first of all, thank you. I think it's an important step in the right direction. Hopefully the other boards now in the town will support our decision. And we can move the process forward. In that regard, we had a fairly lengthy conversation with the town attorney yesterday concerning the construction manager's contract. My hope is that that contract gets finalized and signed, at least for pre-construction services, because as everyone here knows, and especially the BET members who were both here Wednesday and now today with Bill, it's critical that we start getting some estimates now on a design for New Lebanon, so.
We have a meeting on the 29th, so if I'm just tracking, you're meeting Thursday?
Thursday, the
Get that to
21st.
us, yeah, get that to us before the 29th, that could be on our agenda on the 29th.
There's no chance of a special meeting before then?
Okay, well, there's a timing to all this, and we'll work it through.
So the 20th, okay.
Any other business? I will look to see on Wednesday, if there is no business for us to do, and I'll talk to Richard about that, and then where we are with Gilbane. There might not be a need to meet Wednesday night.
Okay, but Monday's a holiday, so I have to get it in today for the agenda.
All right, fair enough. Can you foresee, and even if we sign the contract with Gilbane, I'm not sure, even if we were to, it's not happening today, although I'd be shocked if it happened today. So assuming Monday's a holiday, I forgot, thank you. So even assuming we were to, in a perfect world, have Gilbane on Wednesday, they're not gonna have much to give us by Tuesday, by Wednesday. I'm not sure there's any decision of this committee to meet on that's needed for Wednesday.
We needed a subcommittee.
Okay, well all right, why don't we cancel the meeting on Wednesday evening? I don't wanna meet just to meet, I think we're gonna have a lot of heavy lifting to do over the next couple of weeks.
We wanna see you though.
Can we push that following meeting to 7:30?
We can talk about that, I'll send out an email. I just wanna make sure I don't preclude people that have things in calendars. Hold on, Don?
Steve, I just want to throw out something for you as a general taxpayer too, and I don't get a chance to get to all your meetings. I would really ask you to consider the prefab type of off-fab, whatever you want to call it. And the reason for it is simply the kids stay in the school that they're in now for that period of time during that construction. That's important. It not only saves us time, money, for not the kids not moving all over town, being split up and everything else. And I think that's great for the kids and for the families down there. The school could certainly be delivered and put up over a summer, even if you lost a month due to something or other. I don't think it's going to take them 4 months to put the modulars together. I've seen enough of modular houses and buildings put up. They don't take that long. So I'd appreciate that. The other thing, Bill, I know you want that soccer field, but you guys got to remember, these kids are only 7, 8 years old. If they started to run from one end of a pro soccer field to the other, they'd be dead on the other end of it. So just remember their age,
There's
okay?
the quote, Ken, tomorrow.
Bill Drake wants to kill kids.
All right, thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Any other, so we're not meeting Wednesday,
Do I have
this
to
coming
post that?
Wednesday.
Do I have to post that we're not meeting?
Yes.
Yes.
To cancel the meeting.
Any other comments then, because we'll be meeting a week and a half from now.
Quick detail, are these good documents,
regular,
do
they're not supposed to be
they
regular.
end
No,
up
no, you post the
posted
schedule, but you
on
don't.
our?
They already posted.
They will,
They're
yeah.
on there.
Yeah. So-
Thank you.